Okay, so I didn't do my homework. I don't have anything in terms of memes or creme posting stuff or anything for today. So.
All right, then I'm going to ask you a question, okay? Very important. When you first read this book, were you Team Eland or Team Zane?
Elend. For one, it's Elend.
Okay.
And for two, Zane is barely a character.
Okay, so Team Elend.
Yeah, not even, yeah, come on.
Fair enough.
All right, so welcome to Cosmere Casual, your casual listener's guide to Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. I'm your co-host and, I don't know, I guess bag of wet sand or wet blanket, something like that, Nick Gorman.
And I'm your co-host, AJ Gorman.
And today we're doing our pre-read episode for The Well of Ascension, Book 2 in Mistborn Era 1.
Yeah, I can never remember the name of this novel, ever.
Yeah. Well,
it's always just
whoa.
The second book in Era 1. That's it, to me. That's all that sticks in my brain.
No, whenever you see it on like, you know, Reddit and stuff, it's always WOA, and it's just like, whoa.
Oh.
I was making a joke.
Yeah, I can.
And just like every good joke, it really needed to be explained, right? That's how you know a joke is
When it comes to
great.
you and me, yes.
Oh, well, okay. Yikes.
We should probably start with a recap.
Yeah. Oh, snap. I still didn't do my homework, so I don't.
Well, I actually wrote down a recap.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's.
Well, I did my homework. So, here we go. So, Mistborn Era 1, Book 1, aka Final Empire. Did that come out of my mouth weird? It sounded weird. Final Empire.
Everything sounds lovely from you, dear.
Okay. Moving on. So, summary of the first book. We had Vin, a street urchin who was actually a Mistborn, meaning that she could burn all of the metals and kind of access power through all of those metals. She can influence emotion. She can increase her strength and senses. She can look at prospective past and futures of herself and others. She was kind of living on the streets in a very bad situation. She gets somewhat saved by a man named Kelsier, who has his own kind of heist gang. Kelsier wants to overthrow the god Emperor and
the Lord Ruler.
The Lord Ruler.
He's God Emperor and Dune. This is well. Anyway.
Well, he is God. They just refer to him as the Lord Ruler.
Yes,
but he is their god. And they actually do it. They actually kill the sliver of infinity, their god, the Lord Ruler.
Yeah, Kelsier / Nietzsche. Well, I guess he's a philosopher. He's the one who said that God is dead. Anyway. Yeah, I guess okay. Kelsier isn't the one who kills God. It's Vin.
Vin does kill him. Kelsier gets killed in the process shortly before Vin kills the god, Lord Ruler. But Kelsier was instrumental in his whole thing was to get a rebellion started. And as the rebellion is kind of kicking off, that's when Vin kills the Lord Ruler. The big twist of the first book is that the God Emperor is not Alendi, the author of the logbook that our gang members had been reading throughout the book.
The Lord Ruler is instead Rashek, Alendi's packman, and it's sort of
a fulcrumist.
Yeah, Farukamist.
A Farukamist. So Farukamist is a different kind of power classification magic classification system. So using a combination of Farukami and allomancy, which is the burning of the metals magic system, he was able to kind of keep himself alive. Be immortal essentially.
Well, I feel like Brando Sand like this in Mistborn Brando Sando does a pretty good job of like revisit, like, going over the basics of the magic system again at the beginning of the book.
He
Like,
does, yeah.
as I said, I don't think it's that important to, before going like, how does it work? Yeah, he explains it again. But I remember, the key sort of, plot points from the first book were the MacGuffin that they used to get the thieves all on board with this ludicrously dangerous heist. Was that they were going to steal the Lord Ruler's Atium stash. Basically, they were going to steal from the treasury. And Atium is a fictional metal, but it in the world of Mistborn, it lets the Mistborns see the future just for a few seconds, which, if you're an assassin, is incredibly valuable. It also
fighting
is,
another Mistborn, yeah.
And it's also just sort of the thing that underpins their whole economy. So then when they actually killed the Lord Ruler, they never found the Atium stash.
And everybody, as part of the second book, it's kind of everybody's trying to find out where this Atium is. Yeah, and it's a kind of a plot driver.
Yeah.
So along with trying to figure out what about this Atium, book 2 also kind of focuses on why, well, at least the excerpts at the beginning of the chapters, we're kind of focusing on why is it that Rashek is in Alendi's place? Like, we understand the what, but we don't understand why, and we get into a little bit of why in the second book. Do you think that's good enough of a recap?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in general, like, the other, yes. So because we didn't talk about Elend really at all, and he was a big part of the first bok, right? Where,
well, yeah, he's a big part of all 3 books, I would argue. Yeah,
but his role, he's sort of an outcast philosopher, nobleman from a really high-ranking family
who's not part of the gang.
Is not part of the gang, during the events of the first book, but he, as part of Kelsier, starting an uprising and a rebellion, Ellen's family basically, leaves town, but Ellen is like, no, I've got to find Vin, and basically gets himself in potentially a lot of, he risks his life to try to catch up with Vin, but that allows him to basically be in a position of power once, the collapse happens.
I forget, did we learn that he was king at the end of the first one or beginning of the second?
I think it's confirmed at the beginning of the second.
Okay.
But it's, like you see where things are going at the end of the first, where, all the other nobles have left town, and he's, in a position, he's the only one with leadership experience in town.
Yeah.
The other thing is that Kelsier dies. The Lord Ruler kills him, but there is a creature.
He's a martyr.
Yeah, he becomes a martyr, but he had planned for this, right? He was always planning to martyr himself to get the rebellion going. But he also
a plan B, but it was a plan. Yeah.
But he had an agreement with a creature called a Khandra. And Khandras are shapeshifters that they eat the bodies and the bones of people who are already dead.
I don't know if shapeshifters is the right. They're very good at copying.
They're literally shapeshifters. I would say we literally. Yeah.
All right, fine.
So they're shapeshifters that eat they eat the bones of they eat corpses and then can copy them perfectly. And so we at the very climax of Final Empire, Kelsier starts appearing to people and continuing to preach rebellion, and his motto is basically survive at all costs. He's Kelsier the survivor. And so he not only becomes a martyr, he's a Christ figure, and he's laying the groundwork for a religion to form around him. And we do see the start of a religion forming in this book too. Yep. Okay, but enough about book 1. Let's talk about book 2. Yeah. So what do you spoiler free, let's say spoiler free sort of,
Yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, what do you think about when you think about book 2? Do you gravitate towards this book? Do you not?
It's not. My favorite from Mistborn Era 1 is the first book, is the Final Empire. Mm-hmm. I like, because this is less of the first one's a heist novel. This is a very different, like, this is the city's under siege. And, as bleak as the first book is, and it is bleak, this is bleak in a different way, where the walls are closing in, and that's the vibe of the whole thing. The world is starting to fall apart.
Yeah, I think book 2 might be my favorite out of the 3 in this series.
Good.
I really like the pacing of this book.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, there's a lot going on, all the time, but it doesn't feel like the Brandon Sanderlanche the whole time.
Yeah.
Like it keeps on moving.
And
it's not.
There's fight scenes well distributed all throughout, right? Like it starts out with. I don't
really care about those, but yeah.
Well, they do help keep the pace going, right?
Yeah, they do. But yeah, I really like the pace of this one.
Yeah.
And yes, we see, we start to see that there are lots of things wrong.
Yeah.
With the world.
And as it turns out,
but we also don't know the full scale. Like the third book, like you realize the full scale of things, but the second one is kind of like a nice breather between issues between book 1 and 2 and 3.
Like the main goal of the first book was, okay, there is the evil emperor is in charge and he's the source of everything wrong with the world. So they get rid of the book ends with them getting rid of him, and he has these ominous last words of "You don't know what I did for you," right? And then this starts out like a year later.
A year later, yeah.
And as it turns out, killing the evil overlord didn't solve all their problems. And it's like, oh crap, now what?
Yes. So this is kind of the first book was collapsing, the structure, government structure that was there, and this is post-collapse.
Yeah.
And setting up a new government and how difficult that is. You're suddenly at war with neighbors.
I mean, it's literally a civil war, right? It used to be one empire, and now you've got all these different kings popping up.
Yeah. And instead of a heist in the first book, this one we are kind of the underpinning kind of story structure is we've got to find a traitor. There's a traitor in the gang.
The city is under siege, but they find out that, pretty early on that there's a second Khandra. They found a second set of bones, right, that weren't expected. So so someone has been disposed of, and a Khandra is in their place.
Yes. So you've got to we've got to figure out who the traitor is.
Yeah.
And I don't want to talk about it too much, but just the first time you read this novel, did you figure out who the traitor was, or were you surprised?
Oh, heck no.
Yeah, I didn't either.
And on this reread, like I pointed out to you, I was like, oh, I got to the exact paragraph where where it's the very first clue.
But that's because you knew.
That's because I knew.
Yeah. And for some reason, I had in my mind the switch was at a totally different spot, so I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
I still have not.
It's one of those things that even going back when you know who the traitor is, it's like, well, when did the switch occur, right?
Right.
And that's one of the big things. So.
So the second book, we got to find the traitor. Still dystopia. We have 4 central viewpoints. We have Vin, Elend, Sazed, and then I'm gonna count Zane.
Okay. We have a few scenes from from Tyndall.
Twindle and Breeze.
Okay, yeah.
But those are more
onesie twosies, right?
Yeah. Everything is chronological from chapter to chapter.
Yeah. No, I don't think there's any flashbacks.
No, there's no flashbacks.
Yeah.
But no, I find this book much easier to swallow than Final Empire or Warbreaker.
Is that because we're already familiar with the world and we know what's going on?
I mean, all 3 of the books are like kind of war focused.
Yeah.
But yeah, you feel a lot more settled as a reader because it's a sequel. But I much prefer, there's a more focus on kind of more political intrigue.
Yeah. I mean,
there was political intrigue in Warbreaker, but I don't know. I prefer this kind of political intrigue.
Yeah. So where I'm at with this is that it seems to me like the biggest focus of this book is like, self-identity, right? Like who, all the characters are trying to figure out who are we now that, they had defined themselves in opposition, as rebels for so long, and they found themselves in charge. And
even moreover, they kind of had identified themselves with Kelsier, and now Kelsier's gone.
Exactly. And so they're all struggling with, who even are they in this new world, right? And it's even a year later, and they're still, they don't really know who they are anymore.
Yeah, I think Brandon considers this novel more about trust, at least when it comes to Vin, because the first book, Vin really had to learn to trust, and now the second book is kind of testing that trust.
Yeah, especially when she has hard proof that someone can't be trusted. but she doesn't know who.
Yeah, but she doesn't want to go back to not trusting, but she finds it really hard to look for this traitor.
Yeah, and to not slip into paranoia.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you've alluded to it a few times. Do we want to talk about the love triangle, or is it just this is?
I don't really, because
without getting into spoilers. Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't want to give people kind of pre-notions about the third leg.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it more next episode.
I just don't. It almost feels like something the publisher made him put in. You know what I mean? I don't.
No, this was very much Brandon, because he wanted.
It's a trope, yeah, and I guess
he wanted a comparison.
The right age. Yeah. Okay. When you have two teenage protagonists, one's a boy and one's a girl, well, you gotta have a third leg in there.
I mean, he didn't do that with Shalon and, well, I guess maybe I
was about to say, are you sure? You sure?
I mean, depends how many people you're counting, because this
right.
Shalon different from, I can't even remember her name.
But that's in Stormlight. We'll get there. We'll get there.
That one's not so much a triangle as a three-dimensional story.
Anywho,
back to
what other
Well of Ascension.
Well, I was about to say in the Well of Ascension, and I feel like in general with sequels in the Cosmere, the scope is always bigger with a sequel. Almost always, I'll say. Where the conflict in the Final Empire was almost entirely contained, within the crew. Like the stakes were all, well, if we fail, we're gonna die, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then in this one,
but if the crew fails this time, the whole city's gonna
die. And you see that in each of the other series where whenever there's a sequel, the scope gets bigger. You start local, then it's the whole country, then it's the whole world, then it's the universe.
Well, then it's the planetary system, and I mean, you have to do that, otherwise.
Yeah. But so it's this one's bigger.
There's not a whole lot new that we learned from the magic system. This may be this.
Yeah, I was about to say, well, Brando Sando does a pretty good job of explaining that, and if we get there, we'll get there. I was about to say, because there's
one new element, but
there's new stuff.
Yeah.
But
there's a lot more that you learn about the magic in book 3. So if you want to learn more, well,
I was about to say I need to go and flip to the Ars Arcanum in the back to see where things shake out at the very end of this book, because I do think they discover a few things.
They do discover a few things, but I think they discover a few more in book 3.
Yes.
So if you're looking for even more of the magic system, pushing limits and everything, hang in there till book 3.
Yeah.
I think my issue with not being able to remember the name of this book is just because it's not highlighted as much in the book itself. And the book's not really
about the Well of Ascension.
No.
Right? I mean, it's something that the way it fits in near the end, like it's hard to talk about what it is without getting into spoiler territory. Like, I mean, I guess. But we don't have that problem with other books in the series in the Cosmere, like, because Warbreaker, you don't even see it doesn't come up until like the last pages, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, man.
Well, I have trouble remembering that one too. Actually,
okay.
I just think of it as the Colors books.
Okay. Well, this is not the Colors book. This is that everything is
the best
gray.
Listeners.
Apparently, I guess. Is there anything else? I mean,
do we want to talk about?
Do we want to talk about content warnings? Like, I think because
there's still a whole lot of violence. There's still a whole
lot of violence and oppression and subjugation of people, right? But I think the thing that's most the only thing that's new or different from the previous book in terms of content warnings is you see in more detail abusive and manipulative relationships.
In this book?
Yeah. I was thinking in particular Straff Venture and how he relates to people, and you get him and the way he neglects his children and abuses them.
That's true,
well.
But he's also your more stereotypical
mustache
bad guy. So it's a lot harder to deal with those kinds of not so good relationships when it's kind of like a middling or supposedly good character.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit easier to read when it's the stereotypical bad guy.
Yeah, that's fair.
Still bad, definitely.
Yeah.
Just like most of the other books in the Cosmere, Brandon does have annotations for Well of Ascension on his website. They are still just kind of mildly interesting to me. I think the most interesting annotations are when we get like a different viewpoint than the four main characters. I'm thinking of a couple characters in particular, but we'll have to talk about that in the next episode.
Are there any world hop? I haven't finished my reread. My third or fourth reread at this point, but I haven't finished. I don't remember noticing any world hoppers in this book. I don't even think there's a Hoyd cameo unless he, is very, very subtle about it.
No, but we do have a couple of words of Brandon of what Hoyd is doing during this book.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to that one, when we get to those episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, we see characters who show up in Stormlight, but I mean, nobody.
Yeah, characters who will become world hoppers.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I really like about this book is we get to learn a lot more about Terracemen.
Yeah, and the Terrace culture.
And particularly Sazed's background.
Yeah.
Which I always thought, especially on my first read of Final Empire, I always thought Sazed was like the coolest character, and I wanted to learn more in book 2. Definitely catered to that.
Yeah. So if you're going in for a reread, I think your goals for like, all right, so now that you know everything.
Or maybe it's been so long that you forget.
Okay. Well, I think
some things.
I think if you're going in for a reread, the obvious, Easter eggs, the things to watch out for are when does the replacement happen with the traitor, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think what else there is to. I mean, and obviously, if you already read it before, pay attention to the epigraphs and what they're saying. And what they're with the full context of having read the trilogy before, what do the epigraphs really mean? And I think that's the only key things to watch out for if you're on a reread, right?
Well, I didn't remember everything that the other Mistborn was doing and how everything that he was doing played into things. So even on my next reread, hopefully I remember and kind of pay attention more to that.
Okay.
And surprise, surprise, there is more commentary on religion.
Yeah, because we
Church of the Church of the Survivor.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you got?
Oh no, the other thing that you should look out for in this book is everything. Everything that Kelsier says.
Well,
particularly when it comes about the history of Kandra.
Oh yeah, everything about about how Kandra work.
Mm-hmm. And contract and how that works.
Yeah, I was starting to highlight a lot of things with that. I have questions now, but we'll talk about that probably in the Cosmere Connections episode.
I have lots of questions too, but then you reminded me that a lot of book 3 deals with some of those questions that I'm like, I don't remember any of that being discussed in book 3, but I also don't remember much of book 3. So I am going to be very excited to read book 3 in a couple weeks here.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. There's also some deleted scenes and an alternate ending. I haven't read those yet, but those are on Brandon's website if you're interested.
Yeah. Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, thanks for podcasting with me, and thanks for listening to our podcast. If you want to send us any feedback or thoughts or questions, please reach out to us at our email of cosmerecasual@gmail.com. Our intro and outro music is licensed through Tribe of Noise. The song is Odyssey, and the artist is Ketsa.
And until next time, keep your wits about you.